There. Nerima Wako, she is the executive director and co-founder at Siasa Place and political analyst. You've had her here before on the State of the Nation. That's what she's here to talk about. And Arnold Maliba, he is the policy analyst, a policy analyst to put it simply, but I have to get this titled right. He is a manager in charge of strategic partnerships and policy dialogues at Emerging Leaders Foundation, ELF. That's for the benefit of your boss to know that you still represent him. Thank you for your time. And
it's actually a her.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's for the benefit of your boss to make sure that you are still secure. Now, where do we start? I mean, we have the sugar report and the bribery allegations from Parliament. We have the National Lands Commission chairman who's been let go just yesterday on bail, and of course there will be pre-trial on August 29th. There is the demolitions of structures and the reactions from some of the leaders. And then now there's the ex-Nairobi executives who are also facing charges of graft. So, I mean, this is a bad conversation to have on your birthday, first of all. Happy birthday, Nerima.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And sorry to spoil the mood, but what's the state? Let's start with that. What's the state of the nation as you see it right now?
Wow. Difficult question, because as of right now, it seems that our government is wasting a lot of money. We already saw in terms of taxes, a lot of people are concerned about the matatus, the fare going up.
Yes.
Then couple that on top of hearing that members of parliament are receiving bribes because to serve their own interests. So we could clearly see how they were trying really hard to defend themselves.
Yes.
And say this didn't happen, this is false allegations, and actually blaming the media on that. I would say one, let's wait for the evidence. As much as they're saying that there are videos which could show these actions, let's wait on that, because our country has a reputation for getting rid of the whistleblower. I'm going to frankly say that I'm proud and happy that an MP actually stood up and openly said that this is what's happening within the House.
Yes.
Whether it's true or false, that's another story. But to have the guts to say that, it takes another level of courage in our country.
Given the context and background of what happens to
whistleblowers.
Yes.
Precisely. And then for you to go on and say that it was actually fundraising for our wedding, that's even worse. It's like, so you're spending your working hours to do things which are social.
Yes.
You could have done this at a private event after. So that means you're still using taxpayers' time and money to discuss things which have nothing to do with them. So it doesn't make you look any better. So it almost sounds and looks quite ridiculous. I think at this moment, they just need to go by the evidence that's available. Because the louder that they speak about how they didn't do it, they are not involved, the more ridiculous they appear. They sound like empty vessels.
Or even, it seems, admission of guilt, some would say, with all these reactions that are coming in. What's your view right now, from what you've just seen playing out at Parliament?
I think, having watched all that, I think as a nation we are at a very good point.
Okay.
For one, the cost of corruption has actually gone low. MPs are actually receiving as little as 10,000. We should actually be happy that at least we are making progress. Secondly, that all these are coming up just a year after elections. It should serve as an opener to us to just realize that an election is normally not an event. It's a process.
Yes.
So once you go into that booth and you cast your vote, remember you actually are going to live for the next about 1,500 days with that leadership. So we are just marking the first anniversary and people are livid about what is happening. But I would say that the people of Kavirondo, specifically North and South, which is Nyanza and Western as it is today, are people who are glorious, are people who are heroic, but they don't deserve the kind of leaders they have. A number of them, a few of them, like Nerima has said, it takes a lot of guts for a member of parliament, young as Didmas Barasa is, to actually come out and talk about corruption being in the House. Because there's also bullying in parliament. Serious one, where you actually will not be given time to breathe. But the rest of them are actually silent. Yet, sugarcane farming in Western and Nyanza has been a backbone for years.
Yes.
There are families that went to school, there are economies that depend on that. Yet, they have a crop of leaders who just go around this and they play around. The same thing with water hyacinth.
Right. But let's rewind a bit to when this all started, because it has had a lot of twists and we can get lost in, following the blame game right now. But it started with the CS giving revelations of what he believed was presence of contaminated sugar and saying that he would get to the bottom of this. Well, now the parliamentary committee says there's no contamination, or at least no mercury, from what we've heard with Kanini Kega's admission there. And so there shouldn't be any worry in terms of, in that aspect. Should that give us a relief and to stop pursuing this at the moment? What's your take on how it's really been twisted over time since the CS's admission?
I would say that from the onset, it's been a very complicated issue because as you speak about how the CS had mentioned that within a span of a few hours, there was a contradictory statement from another high-level official. So it already appeared that there was confusion based upon not necessarily fact. Okay. And that, for me, is a concern in our country, where every time a scandal comes up or every time an issue comes up, we're more concerned of who's behind it. Because now the conversation revolved around, well, if there's no mercury, it's because they're targeting the owners of the sugar businesses, because now it's become political, because now they're trying to start businesses with other entities. So it quickly escalated to the belief or the fact that there are cartels in our country that control certain businesses and things like that. So people are not even talking about the safety of the people. And that should have been priority. Whether or not there is mercury or not, we should have seen the results from different observations from different entities who did that research. And that's what we should have based our knowledge upon, not necessarily hearsay and she-say. And I think that's the issue with our country. The fact that I don't even know what the truth is, because we are so used to hearing people. The same with even, we can talk about Mao. You know, there are people who are talking about it being a conversation between conservation and eviction. And then you can clearly see that it has historical injustices linked to it as well. It's everything that we talk about, from even the fuel. When we talk about even our high electricity bills, we can link it to politicians. And that is the concern for our country, and that is the rot of corruption in our country, as soon as business and politics sleep in one bed.
Well, in trying to pursue this story then, many attempted to say that this is definitely, as she's mentioned, a fight between the business people within the sugar cartels. Because you've said, I mean, sugar has been an economy that has supported many families and regions, in fact. And this is then, not something to wish away, that in fact it's cartels that are at war, and perhaps that are informing the political leaders' opinions on who is to blame with this current sugar scandal.
I think, first of all, we need to fight corruption backed by evidence, like Nerima said earlier on. It needs to be an evidence-based fight for obvious reasons. That you never know which hand is left and which hand is actually right. You see, if we are beginning from a place where even the government has moved the government chemist from the Ministry of Health to Interior. Probably that in itself says a lot, that they do not trust the independence of the government chemist while he or she is domiciled in the Ministry of Health. I think whereas we are constrained of resources, it would be, in my opinion, important to have some duplicity levels in government. You see that in other countries, that you'll have a number of layers of institutions doing things that are related. So rather than move the government chemist from the Ministry of Health to Interior, which more feels like we are militarizing the state, we should actually have given that capacity, or rather develop similar capacity with the DCI forensic lab that is actually coming up, so that we can actually check balances, checks and balances being there. The whole fight around corruption is actually not very honest. It's not very evidence-based. You don't know who says the truth. Sometimes you see the truth. And like my pastor used to say, anything that looks like truth is a lie. Lies are supposed to be absolute, or rather truth is supposed to be absolute. So you will see the same thing even in the Ruaraka land saga, where everybody who says that the land is public does not have evidence. And we actually will forget that even government can actually grab land, especially when it is for the good of a few people. So
Or in the name of development, which is thrown out?
Public developer is actually euphemism for land grabbers, just the same way we call big shots when we are just calling thieves. They should just be thieves, but we use some very good words getting around that. And the president also seems like, whereas he's doing good work, he's even surprised by the progress he's made. He's even forgetting the law. Like the other day, he told young people, you can arrest people who are corrupt. Yet, there's a rule of law, we've got a constitution to follow. So if I feel like Nerima is corrupt, I can actually just go after her. Right. Now, what is that?
Okay. Yeah. So what you're saying is it's not so much just talking about the presence of or belief of corrupt elements within a particular sector, which has been, I mean, week after week, it's like we have a new scandal. Yes. You know, you're not too impressed by that because perhaps you feel corruption has been there, but give us something that we can really go to court with and bring someone, you know, to book or take them to jail. Is that what would come out as a successful fight against graft, instead of the naming, shaming, aligning them in court, and it doesn't quite end at, you know, people behind bars?
Yeah, it would be convictions, especially of high-profile corruption cases, but also it would have to include systemic changes, because even when we can even give classic examples of NYS.
Yes.
And how so much money has been plundered and stolen, and yet when we keep changing those who lead NYS but not necessarily changing how systems are done, because you would clearly see that it would be in procurement and tendering and proxy companies and people who are related to people within the department who are actually doing business, and then there's not much follow-through. Even though there's a vendor who's been identified, there's no sign of service delivery and things like that, the checks.
Okay.
So if we change individuals within the system without changing the systemic function of it, then we're wasting time. And that's the same with EACC as well. And that's the same with even police and structures. And that's what builds our countries, our institutions. So as long as we convict people who are corrupt and do not change our institutions to be stronger, then convictions won't mean anything. They have to come hand in hand.
If they do indeed come hand in hand, but what is the end that will mean this is success for us? For instance, let's use the sugar issue. Now it seems with the admission of Kanini Kega, who headed that committee, there was no mercury. So there's no one to hold culpable for having imported contaminated sugar. So that's, you know, case closed. Is that really where it ends? If a parliamentary report that's now seemingly shrouded with a lot of, you know, interest within itself, given the powers that be with the sugar cartels, is that where this story dies?
Well, Mark, before we even look at that, it's important to tell Kenyans that they should not be carried away by the crackdown that is happening at the moment. There's not so much to it. Even under President Moi, there was a crackdown, a very serious one, and people clapped. Under Kibaki, we had a crackdown, a similar one, but corruption still persisted. Today, Uhuru Kenyatta is actually doing the same, and we think probably he's different.
Given his legacy
and talking about what Kanini Kega has said, you know, I almost burst into laughter when he said that Parliament needs to redeem its image. And you want to ask, does Parliament really have an image to protect in the first place, leave alone redeem? Seeing how they do their things and everything they get around. And a parliamentary report might not be one of the best things to trust in.
Okay.
For simple reasons. You know, I'm looking at the Ruaraka land issue that actually the Senate did the other day. There is a report done by the National Assembly, way the 11th Parliament, I think when Kapondi was the chair. And they went through the Ruaraka land saga, when the GSU was buying the other side, and that thing was settled. Today, if you look at the Kapondi report, and you look at what the Senate produced, they don't speak to each other. So you see the other day, the Speaker of the Senate picking up a fight with the Speaker of the National Assembly, picking up a fight with the Senate Speaker, saying that the Senate is overstepping. The one reason why the Ruaraka land report or other issue has not gone into a committee in the National Assembly is that it has already been dispensed over.
Yes.
So committee reports, and Kanini Kega is not the government chemist. We have not had a separate results coming out of it. So anything that comes from Parliament must be treated as a lie, first of all, until it's proved otherwise. Because they have proved to really speak. And they really have got a lot of alibi. I was in Mombasa, I was in Nakuru, we were raising money for a wedding. How will you really contribute 10,000 to a fellow member of parliament who's wedding? 10,000? Literally. But then, like I said, I am actually happy that the cost of corruption has come down. Probably the president is doing something. A long time ago, MPs will take millions. They are now accepting 10,000. That's just $100. And it's so sad that young people like Bobby Wine in Uganda, member of parliament,
yes,
are actually putting their life in line to redeem a country. Yet their age mates in the Kenyan parliament are taking $100, and the people the age of Bobby Wine's father are taking $100 of a bribe to sell a country. And corruption, looking at sugar, actually is a threat to national security. Already, out of this scandal, the EAC is in turmoil because Tanzania has actually blocked Ugandan sugar, saying that that is Kenyan sugar that we are trying to clean in here. Yes. So just see how a small thing, not really small, how corruption around here affects the region.
Yes.
That Magufuli and Museveni today are having a fight because of the sugar scandal here. It's a serious issue that should not be treated lightly.
Okay, he's brought up something before we take a quick break about not being impressed about people being lined up or arrests and what have you. Do you see orchestration in all this? Being indeed that we appreciate it's the legacy term of the president, and he says he's losing friends, and we'll hear that. And he really wants to show that he's tough on graft. Would there be an issue of or concern of orchestration with all these scandals coming up week after week?
Absolutely. There's nothing haphazard that happens in our country, and I repeatedly say that about our own security. As much as we are actually protected really well, our national intelligence does observe its people, and that's why we have all these cameras happening around. So as much as we like to say our government does not have the knowledge, in things like this, they have all the knowledge. There is, I would say, an historical, when it comes to our country, I do agree with Arnold very much, and including the lifestyle audit. Mwai Kibaki also tried to have a lifestyle audit. And so you can see similarities in the actions that they're taking. And Kenyans, as a people, we have very short-term memory, where when things are repeated, we tend to act like they are brand new.
Yes.
And so it's very easy to rebrand. And that's why we even have the same politicians coming over and over again with the same lies, but we fall for them every time, like they are brand new. So it's interesting to see, and I believe that once we see how the courts are going to rule over these cases, then I'll be able to speak. But as of now, it looks like the same script, the same story.
There's no part of you that has some form of belief in this campaign. Just really shortly, you and
by the way,
Arnold.
Sure.
If the president says that he's losing friends, but then we know your character by your friends. So if those are the kind of friends the president has, then what do we say of the president?
That is quite the comment there. You just lost friends in that comment itself. Nerima, any part of you believing in this campaign?
No, not yet. No.
All right.
That how can you just sit there and watch all this destruction going on? You must stop it. And I said, well, it's difficult to stop. It's difficult to stop not because we love to destroy, but because we must fight impunity. A time has come for us to fight impunity. A time has come for every Kenyan to realize, no matter how powerful you think you are, no matter how much you think you know people in high position, no matter how much money you have, that will not save you. That will not save you.
And many Kenyans did say or throw their weight behind that statement by the president, saying they fully support him in his fight against impunity. And Nerima and Arnold, he is ready to lose friends at the benefit of fighting corruption. This, you say, doesn't really convince you, but he seems to have some action given what is happening right now. Buildings that over the years have been built, even after reports of them being on riparian land, but they still went up, and now they're coming down. Something is being done.
Okay, Mark. Something is being done, the fact that the buildings are being destroyed. But are we talking about the fact that NEMA is now going out there and making sure the buildings coming up are certified to go up where they're going up? Because we've seen too many people dying because buildings have not been structured well. So as much as we're seeing progress somewhere, like I said earlier, that there need to be systemic changes in these organs. So everyone is talking about how exciting it is to see these green tractors and all that and jokes going around, but are we looking at, okay, going forward, now people who are interested in building and investing in the CBD, are there now proper regulations and policies being followed? Because they did have certificates. Someone approved that. Someone did. And so are we going to go and now talk about the people who did? Are we going to now charge the people who did? Those are the conversations we're not having. And that, for me, doesn't really necessarily show a major shift.
But
it's
even
just
the president last
cosmetic.
week said he's going to fight those, not just the owners of the buildings, but those who gave approvals that these buildings be put up in the specific spaces that they stand on right now. He means business, from what you hear.
Well, until we see convictions, like I said, this is razzmatazz. We have seen this drama before, not once. We even saw a man take his own money and put up Integrity Center, put up a whole KCC. We have seen worse, we have seen this. This is not the first time buildings are going down. When Raila was the minister in charge of roads, buildings went down. And we have got the city as it is, so it's not entirely new. But even as we do that, the systemic issues are not being addressed. Those are fruits he's actually taking care of. He's bringing down buildings, but is that really the embodiment of corruption? He's not doing anything about sugar, which is almost $1 trillion shillings worth of an economy in this country.
What would you want the president to do?
So we're talking about,
given that he's left it to the natural course as you would expect it in Parliament, with the related parliamentary committee to take care of business, carry out investigations, and withdraw from any form of interference. What would you want the president to do in that case?
Number one, I would like to see him really engage EACC to do this work, because EACC is mandated to do that. But somehow you realize there has been a deviation. He's been using DCI more, and we hear a lot of NIS being part and parcel of it. So whereas an outfit like NIS would want to work out, they might not be able to present evidence in court because the way they get the evidence is not the way you can't take it to court. So they will want to work it differently. But why is EACC not actively into it? So does EACC have enough money? The judiciary, which should be doing the convictions, has actually been disabled.
Yes.
So, and we still say we are fighting corruption when judiciary, but where justice is served.
Even EACC has had its allocation, brought down. But
that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Where justice is served, because we are looking at justice.
Yes.
It is the preserve of the judiciary. Judiciary doesn't have money, and the president is so busy keeping us focused elsewhere. Yet when we deliver these people in court, it might not really work out. So, I would like to see the instruments and the organs set out in law to fight this being enabled, so that it is not
DCI
a personal fight.
DCI was.
He wants to make it his personal fight when the Constitution has a lot of institutions to do that. Why is EACC not doing it? Why?
Perhaps over time it's shown, and Nerima, you can weigh in on this, perhaps over time it's shown that EACC hasn't been as effective. So that's why they're pursuing this new course with DCI. It's one of the institutions that is acknowledged in terms of pursuing such cases. So one would say it's just a change of tact.
I think you're making an assumption,
Okay.
actually. And interestingly, there are countries which have worked with departments like EACC within state functioning, like boards. For instance, Switzerland, where they don't have an EACC, where within each structure, like we talk about NEMA, DCI, whatever, there is an EACC office within it. Corruption should be fought by everybody. It shouldn't be one particular organ where their main function is fighting corruption, because corruption is faced by everybody. So as soon as we create an organ that is separate but dealing with everybody else,
okay,
it's difficult, especially when we have a history of them not being independent, when we know very well, when we talk about the chair within the EACC, it's very political as to who gets selected and when and why and the funding. So it's difficult to have an institution such as that and expect them to carry out and deliver. Just like what Arnold is saying, within our judiciary and within the ECC, when they are not well funded, when they are not given the independence as it should be, as constitutionally stated, then it's going to be difficult for them to come out as this machine that's supposed to protect us from this corruption that we seem to want to fight.
It comes off somewhat as a conflict of, communication. On one side, speaking harshly against impunity and corruption, but then on the other side, not quite equipping the institutions that are tasked with dealing with it. Now, to a response to what Arnold, you said earlier about the friendship of the president and losing his friends in the fight against impunity, Gennaro Wachira, in his view, says once you have something to offer, you get so many friends. Some even go further to claim that they are your relatives. Once that is not there, they vanish. Real friends always remain no matter what, and they are always few. Sometimes they are not there. Perhaps in defense to what the president was saying, that many people would like to elude themselves as friends. He basically says, or even if he had them as friends before, he wants to disassociate himself. Perhaps this is a new awakening for the president and the leadership.
Well, fair enough. Wachira gets it right. There's always a turning point, and I think the president is at that particular time.
Right.
He's now going to get proper friends, people who gave him votes. They've always been his friends, and probably he hasn't trusted them as much. People who voted for him and they do their work well, wake up in the morning and just do it right to make a living, struggle out there, and they do not encroach on law. So he's now getting, I was only like alluding to where he's come from. He actually has just come from Egypt, and we welcome him to Canaan.
Has some connotations there. But a concern that we raised during one of the breaks there is that as much as we want impunity to be fought and corrupt individuals to be brought to book and convictions to be made and handed down, there is as well a systematic way of approaching this, and we can borrow from what democracies that you have even been part of while they were fighting corruption. There is that concern of these corrupt individuals, the big friends that the president might say, those who have a lot of money and are now, defriending him or unfriending him, that they've controlled a huge part of the economy. And, we have to be systematic about how we go about bringing them to book. Can you just, expound on that?
I was basically saying that corruption is a very complicated issue in our country, just because a lot of corrupt individuals are politicians, and when they have access to power, then they have access to business and a functioning of an economy. And so as soon as we talk about taking care of corruption abruptly, what are we talking about? Our economy. When you have certain individuals actually owning commodities that we use, basic needs of every single day, what does that mean? What kind of transition is that going to look like? And that's where technocrats come in, because corruption is not something that's only dealt with in Africa. We can see corruption in the United States also. It's lobbying. They've just completely changed the term. But where it becomes dangerous is when we focus on corruption and we don't care about life. When we talk about using means to make sure we save money and build money, but then we don't care of the harm that we're putting on people, that's a worrying corruption. And when we talk about the United States, we have the Koch brothers. They own multiple oil industries in the US, and they control the way government functions. They control PAC. They control policies that go through because of the amount of money they're able to channel through lobbying. But that's something that we will have a challenge with. And those are the things that, as much as we talk about getting rid of corruption and understanding it, this is where you need technocrats, policymakers, politicians to sit down and figure out how we're able to transition to where we are doing the best for the people and not necessarily getting rid of it all, because it's difficult. Corruption also exists in Switzerland.
In one hand, we're asking for convictions, and the other, we're saying, watch out now because you might affect the economy. So what are we calling for?
We actually are not saying that the president should watch out because the economy will be affected, we know automatically corruption is an economy on its own and it has got a life of its own. It's been there running throughout, even during the colonial system. What we're only saying is that we want a clear strategy so that the president does not show up and treat this particular time like a festival of fighting corruption, an anti-corruption festival, so that after that, like after the music festival, people go home and they forget. It should be systemic. And even as she speaks about the Koch brothers, we know too well that in this country, we also have got a state capture that we talk about old money. Are people who literally, you call it the home guard capital. They captured a lot of capital then just at independence, and they are controlling the economy. Most of it survives on corruption. If we do away with it, there's a way the economy gets shaken. So what we do not see is a clear, thought-out strategy on how to fight this corruption. So we do not want to end up with a performance like I said Moi had a performance around fighting corruption. Kibaki too had a performance of his own. As a country, we are tired of having performance and anti-corruption festivals. We need it dealt with once and for all. That the president has not come out clear. And we point out that because you see, the organs that are expected in this chain are not all, and you see, we say that an army is as strong as its weakest member. So in fighting corruption, there is EACC, of course there's DCI, there's the NIS, there's the public service, then there's the judiciary, and above all, there is parliament, the elephant in the room. Corruption actually goes to die. Well, there has been a saying that corruption cases go to EACC to die. As in, once they get to EACC, they never leave again. That is where they die. Yes. But parliament actually is the John the Baptist of corruption. In your view, it's the weakest link? For me, that is where they go to wash these people. They baptize them. They sanitize, make them clean. Right. So they're now actually receiving sadaka ndogo, like 10,000. That we are now hearing of. They are soon going to actually even have a kanyari like weka kwa hii number. As in, that's where we're headed with these guys. Yes. Yeah. Let's just talk about the experience that you had, just to bring it to people's understanding of what we're talking about, the control of the economy, the experience that you had in India, that period.
Yes, so I was in India in October of 2015, and at the time, due to black money in the market, Prime Minister Modi decided at midnight on a Tuesday that 1,000 rand, or it was illegal. So we woke up the next morning and we found out that most of the money that we had was actually illegal. And it was a way for people to turn in the notes that they had so that the economy can almost start over afresh. They had jump-started it with a new 2,000 rupee note. And it was quite difficult because of the way it was announced. He didn't want people to have time to go and change and money laundering and exchange their money. So he wanted people to be surprised about it. And most people keep their money not even in banks. Most people keep their money in their homes, especially money that they're using for illegal purposes, such as corruption. So the next day, the lines everywhere were just extremely long. In fact, that week, no one was at work. People were at ATMs because you couldn't buy anything with the money that you had because all of a sudden it was worthless. And it was very difficult for us to even have money. We were there with my brother and my mother, and we had to actually ask individuals to help us out of kind and then to help us on credit before they became an announcement where foreigners had access to reach certain ATMs and receive funding. And it's not something that's easy. People complained about it during that process. It was something that was difficult. People were not, I'm talking about doctors not going to work. So people were in hospital camping. It was very grueling. But at the end of it, when people began to understand why he had done it, there were a few people who applauded.
Yeah. 3 years on, wasn't it beneficial? Wasn't it worth
yes.
it? Okay.
3 years on.
So there's the issue of disruption, and perhaps what we're seeing playing out in the different issues, demolitions and what have you. There's the issue of disruption, perhaps that is unavoidable, and it is inevitable in the fight against graft. But then with time, you will see why it was necessary. And we were talking about earlier the disruptive aspect of fighting graft. Excuse me, and that is necessary.
Yes. Talking about disruption, and like we have said repeatedly, that we really are in support of the fight against corruption. what we do not want is having a repeat of what has happened in the past. Yes. I'll give you an example. You remember there was a scandal about iPhones at the DP's office. Have you realized that we've just had the similar thing? So at that particular time, how was it addressed so that it doesn't repeat itself? So we want a clear plan. We want to be assured that there is a strategy, that this time round is not business as usual. That's what we're asking. So disruption is there, and it can actually be done in very many ways. Yeah. Nedima says that when fighting corruption, we honestly have to realize that we are going to be in for a long haul, so that we organize well, fight properly, so that people do not have necessarily to suffer. Because again, once they've brought down houses on the south of Tomboya, then they'll actually be facing north and east. So how many other people are going to suffer? There's going to be, so there's the human cost, the human cost element that needs to be factored in. And we are just saying, can we have a clear picture of where we're going? Because we already see gaps. We already have mentioned those gaps. We just want the president to be serious about it.
I'm getting emotional here, and that's probably why I'm getting choked up.
Excuse me.
Just mate lienda kwingine. But in terms of the demolitions then, using that as an example, where do you want this particular issue to end? Because many buildings that have been up over the years are now coming down, and the president is clear that we won't spare anybody, regardless which development you're part of. In your view, where does this end in terms of success?
In my view, it would be holding people accountable to those particular buildings going down, in understanding who permitted and approved for them to go up, and them being charged. And then secondly, it would be the systemic changes within for permits to be able to be approved. I would be concerned about the current buildings going up, because there are plenty that we see that shouldn't be even going up to the level that they are, but they are going up. Right. So having a change and proper urban planning, because even in our city, I know, for instance, where my parents live, I think there are malls coming up around them. Is that legal? And so those are the questions that I have now as a citizen, and feeling secure that there's actually an institution that is concerned about my housing and my living and my well-being, and then having officers on the ground who are not particularly bribed or swayed by it.
We've spoken of the strategic approach to fighting graft. There was a concern that was raised by the Kiambu governor, Ferdinand Waititu, on what he feels should be a strategy or a different approach in demolishing the constructions within Nairobi. Let's listen in.
Kama mtu ambaye amekuwa na historia ya Nairobi. Mimi Nairobi pale, nimelelewa pale, na nimekuwa deputy governor wa Nairobi. Mambo ingine mimi naona pale, kama hiyo watu wana support ya ubomoaji, mimi hapana support. Mambo iangaliwe, kama kuna nyumba yako inakaribiana na mto, wewe uambiwe ni gharama yako kuhakikisha hiyo mtu imesonga kidogo. Lakini kubomoa nyumba is not a solution. Honestly speaking, it's such a big loss. Na tena mjue, Nairobi beleni ilikuwa ni mashamba. Nairobi beleni kulikuwa na mashamba freehold. Na ndio umeona juzi ule mzee ameshikwa na drama kubwa sana, ule Mburu amewachiliwa kwa sababu title deed yake ni genuine. Hiyo shamba ilikuwa yake 96 acres. Watu walipiga bwembwe ati corruption saa hii hawezi shikwa kwa sababu watu wameona makaratasi ile genuine. Mimi nataka niwaambie, kama zaidi pia mnapigana na corruption, wale wako wanafanya hiyo kazi, kidogo muende polepole, mchunguze maneno sawa sawa. Hapana kimbia ati ni corruption, ati ni kubomoa manyumba ati mnabomoa manyumba, kwa sababu saa nyingine kama ilikuwa shamba ambayo imepita mto, hakukuwa na riparian, ilikuwa title deed ni ya mtu mmoja. Yule mtu alinunua hiyo plot, hakupimiwa ati mpaka hapa ndio kwako. Na sasa maneno ya riparian ya 30 meters imekuja wakati wa Mishuki akiwa minister wa environment. Kwa hivyo maneno ya kubomoa nyumba za watu is so painful. Watu wameinvest a lot, Mr. Deputy President. Na mimi nataka kukwambia, kwa sababu wewe ni hustler ambaye umewekelea mawe kwa ingine na ingine mpaka ukafika pale umefika. Maneno ya ubomoaji iende polepole. Maneno ya corruption ifanywe due diligence kwanza. Kwa sababu mtu asistakiwe kwa bure, aharibiwe jina yake bure, na iwe hakuna maneno imeangaliwa sawa sawa.
I'm sure you've seen this clip, whether via WhatsApp or on your social media platform, whichever is your favorite. And it's easy to laugh it off, the concerns that he raises and his views. But some would say, actually, there needs to be a systemic system in demolishing the buildings, demolishing structures, even in Kibra, where they are on a road reserve. And perhaps part of the system, he hasn't mentioned it, is relocation of populations and, if to some extent, compensation, because a lot of money has gone into this. I'll start with you, Nerima.
Well, the part that I do not agree with is changing the flow of a river. It's a natural resource, and it always seems like bullying. First of all, the river was there before us.
Yes.
So here you come with yourself and you say, you are going to move because I am here now. And that's not how we should treat our environment. At the end of the day, it will be here after us. And we need to be concerned about the resources, the natural resources we leave for our children. I would say that I do believe that, yes, there should be a system. And Arnold also mentioned earlier about how Raila did the same thing when he was in government. There are still places I passed that have that red X. And so it means that it didn't quite finish, but he had begun with demolitions. And there should be a proper way of doing it. And it goes back to urban planning. And that's what I was talking about,
yes,
where we do have, you know, institutions that are to take care of the planning in our population. We know that by 2022, we're here talking about the politics of it, but do we understand that we'll be 52 million Kenyans? Do we understand that the average age will be 19? Do we understand that as much as the big four, one of them is affordable housing,
yes,
but if the average age can't afford housing because of unemployment, what does that look like? I mean, there are ways to properly plan. There are ways to properly plan cities and also to accommodate those who are affected. Because it's not just Kibra when we talk about people settling on road reserves. We should also talk about those in Mau, for instance, evicting people without really finding ways to settle them properly. And that's the kind of planning that our government tends to lack. It's almost reactive rather than proactive when it comes to focusing on citizens.
All right, and in your view, the issue of demolitions, it's not just about bringing the buildings down. And in fact, some argue the demolitions aren't even complete because they're hazardous as have been left right now.
Well, first of all, you must actually thank democracy. It's a very beautiful thing that the same process that gave us Kivuta Kibwana as a governor for Makueni is the process, same process that gave Kiambu, the governor that is Waititu. You see, I know when it comes to property and life, people are very passionate. So Waititu might probably have gotten ahead of himself, but knowing that he is quite a very thinking politician, he meant it, that rivers should move. And Wangari Maathai said that nature is very unforgiving. We've seen that one time too many. When it starts to rain and water always finds its way, it knows where the ancestors went by, so it will always come. So again, it goes back to, is it being done strategically? Do we have where we are starting, the goals for which we want to achieve, and where we are headed? How do we then, again, like I said, ensure that it does not occur? We have done demolitions before. These are new buildings that have come up after a major demolition exercise that went through. Yeah. We have these rules in place. So the systemic gaps that exist must first. That's why I still insist that until we see convictions, until we see the end to this,
yes,
this is so much of style and very little substance. The substance must actually be seen in the end of it. We must see it at that particular place. Because we see the demolitions going around. Now we've done Nairobi, probably we'll be going to Kiambu, and that is why Waititu is getting apprehensive. Or he probably knew they'll be going east after they've left west and Nairobi south, and now they'll be moving this other side. But I think still we do not seal those loopholes that ensure recurrence. Like I've just told you, at Harambee House Annex, we had a scandal with iPhones, people being jewed into it. Yesterday we had laptops in the same office. So there is a problem at Harambee House Annex. Same style, same way. So how was it addressed?
Yes.
We brought down buildings. We are still bringing down buildings that are new, and people are still bringing up buildings. What aren't we doing right? Okay. That's why we are saying, can we do it differently? Yeah.
And I'm sorry you didn't bring this up, but it came to mind when you were talking about the disruptiveness of the economy, when the corrupt individuals who really run sections of the economy through businesses that they've invested in brought to book and brought down. But there's the issue that even Raila Odinga spoke about asset recovery and how we should go about this in terms of stabilizing the economy.
I think a friend of ours actually just shared a report with us, and she actually highlighted that there's been a research that was just done by Tax Justice Network, where Kenya has been ranked as one of the highest countries when it comes to illicit resources and revenues, where tax evasion, money laundering, and things like that. And I think that should be a concern for us, because as much as we talk about the corruption that exists, actually Kenya was ranked at 80% when it comes to money laundering and tax evasion. Then when we talk about assets and things that belong, how are we going to be able to create systems to where we find the people who are, one, accountable, and then two, what kind of strict regulations, if we would want to put there, when it comes to being able to standardize or monitor financial flows, because at the end of the day, it does affect a country. And these are the things that we're talking about, where Maliba mentioned, where corruption in itself can be part of an economy in itself. And those are the concerns in how, when we talk about tackling corruption in our country, that we should be putting into consideration.
Yeah. Your thoughts on the aspect of asset recovery in this fight against graft and stabilizing as we conclude?
One, I said that I do not think that even the assets we are recovering are safe in the hands of the guys we think should be recovering them. History has taught us that sometimes it's just the same guy with different faces, so it just goes around. But talking about the economic element, there are people who put their businesses, money of hard work, into a building. You put up a business, and then because it's built on a wrong place, it goes down. Because you want to assume that a building of this magnitude coming up must have gone through all the approval levels and it's standard. So again, people are going to lose houses, people are going to lose property. We are not talking about the real owners, people who knew too well that they would play with rules and come up with investments to get money from other Kenyans, because those buildings are not just there for, or rather, the construction as put out there is not a decoration.
Yes.
It attracts revenue. So people come in, how does it attract revenue? I'm working somewhere, I get a little bit of money, put in a stall, so you can put it down, there is a bank on my neck, same way. So at any particular time we want to do these things, we want to insist that it has to be strategic. We have got a constitution. The president is not a man like some of us who would have to struggle to get expertise and to have knowledge. The president has got the best knowledge in this country, has got the best brains. He has got NIS at his disposal. He has got the best economists. So the human element costs in all this. The disruption of the economy, even as we get around there, because again, real estate has been quite good in washing illicit money coming in from terrorism, from drugs. That's where people are going to park their money. So how it affects, we will still insist we need a clear plan. We need the end of it. We just I don't want to see a festival again, a festival of bringing down houses, so it becomes ritualistic.
Or razzmatazz, as you put it earlier. Nerima, final remarks in a few seconds before I hand it over to the entertainment segment.
Sure, final remarks. I am hopeful. There are youth who want to see the change, especially when we talk about decreasing corruption and the initiatives such as Why Follow, where young people are calling for not just convictions of high-profile cases, but also making sure that systems that lead youth-led government initiatives are properly managed. So it's very hopeful, and I believe that through that, the president cannot do this on his own. Like I said, corruption has to be something that we all want, and we need it, especially young people.
All right, and as he says, underlined it in most of his remarks that it needs to be systematic and not just haphazard. But thank you very much for your time. We have to end it at this point, but I'm sure you're keen, you're still following. We'll still see you on our air soon as you give your comments and observations on the fight against graft. It seems to be a campaign that will go on, and you say it needs to, if anything, if it will be a legacy, it needs to go on for the rest of the 4 years.
It has to be sustainable.
Yes.
We need a sustainability plan around fighting corruption.
All right.
Because it's deep-rooted.
Okay. Thank you very much, Arnold Maliba, Policy Analyst, as well as the Strategic Partnership Policy Dialogues Manager at Emerging Leaders Foundation, and Nerima Wako, Executive Director at Siasa Place. Happy birthday once more. Thank you for giving us 2 hours of your birthday, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.